still wishing to leave me, go away from me? When you have these, they don't like his words, when you have the words of everlasting life, and they believed. We know you are the Christ. Well, even Acts said the word Christ wasn't used until a Pauline community in northern Syria in the mid-50s. And it's a total Greek word. I don't know how you would translate it in Hebrew, perhaps Messiah. But anyway, this is much later. That means this narrative, the gospel, the apostles didn't say to Jesus, we know you are the Christ. They may have said something, the Messiah. And the Son of the living God, well, the righteous ones, all the righteous ones are sons of the living God, supposedly, as they become perfectly righteous in Palestine. No Messiah was supposed to be the son of anything except in the Greco-Roman imperial world, where all of the emperors and everything were being deified after Augustus. So again, I don't know what you want to make of all that as far as historicity. I just pointed out to you. I'm not going to give you a final judgment on that. You make the final judgment. Anyway, then he first referenced, I think, to Judas Iscariot, Simon's son. And that's interesting. He spoke of Judas, but in the Greek it doesn't say Simon's son. It says Judas of Simon Iscariot. So Simon is also Iscariot, not just Judas. Well, how many have the Greek there? Well, you need the Greek, you see. That's why we want the interlinear to run alongside it. You can't go by your translations. And it doesn't say son. That's what the author or the translators add. Of can mean brother, son, or something like that. Now don't forget, in the synoptic apostle lists, one of Jesus' apostles is called Simon the Canaanite, Simon the Canaanite, but in Luke he's called Simon Zelotes, Simon the Zealot. So if Iscariot is the same thing as Sicari, just the I and the S are inverted, Sicarios, which is the closest thing to it, and in my view, that's how it would have gone into Greek. It's his Greek term, but a Hebrew gone into Hebrew, then back into Greek, because we often, like Plato, it's Aflaton. Instead of Plato, it's Aflaton, because they have to do the syllables different when they move it into, when they move it from Greek into Arabic, Semitic languages, and then back again. So often they do get formed. The vowels go outside instead of inside. So it has to do with syllabification. But anyway, be that as it may, the Sicari, as you should know by this time, are the extreme wing of the Zealot party, the ones who commit suicide on Masada. The ones who go down into Egypt later and fight the Romans there, go into North Africa, which is why my last chapter of my book is called The Cup of the Lord, from Edessa to Cyrene. Cyrene is Libya in North Africa. And the Sicaricon, I call it. And the Sicaricon is the tax that the Romans imposed in Palestine. Again, it's an appropriation of enemy property tax. And what it is was done after the Bar Kokhba or before the Bar Kokhba War. It's not clear. But the Romans confiscated all property of people who revolted against Rome, and they called it Sicaricon probably because of the Sicari, who they called the main rebels. I told you that Hippolytus, another church historian, has a different version of Josephus in which he says there are 4 groups of Essenes, 2 of which are called Zealot Essenes and Sicari Essenes. The main thing about the Sicari Essenes, as I told you, they will kill anyone they hear talking about the law who is not circumcised. They say you don't have any right, like Islam to some extent, you don't have any right to talk about the law unless you're coming under the law. So the knife that Josephus calls the assassin's knife, Sicari meaning curved knife, like the Arabs wear on their shirts to this day to show how hotshot they are, particularly in Yemen and places like that. You know, in Arabia, they have. How many have seen the curved Arab knife over these cattle? That could also be the circumciser's knife as well as the assassin's knife. And early church literature says, and Jerome complains, that Origen in the 3rd century, Jerome is in the 4th and 5th century, did I list Origen? Yeah. Circumcised himself and turned himself into a Sicarius out of zeal for his religion, but his zeal was misplaced. So Sicarius was the name for someone who was circumcised in Roman legislation. And I give you that whole thing in those chapters, but that is very complicated stuff. It has to do with who the Sicarius is. This comes from a body of Roman literature, legislation called the Lex Cornelia de Sicarius, which was a traditional body of legislation having to do with bodily mutilation, particularly making yourself into a eunuch. And they saw circumcision as a form of bodily mutilation of the kind of, what is it, castration. And so Sicari can mean terrorist. It can also mean forcible circumcision. Or, as Paul puts it in the letter to the Galatians, we're talking about James, some from James came down causing trouble here, Galatians 2, they are the party of the circumcision. Does party of the circumcision there mean these extreme groups? To my mind, it does. And the Essenes are actually, the Essenes of the Dead Sea Scrolls, in my mind, are the Sicari Essenes, which is why we find their documents on Masada, where the Sicari finally held up. That's where they went after the Roman troops appeared by the Dead Sea. And when we did the dig in Masada, the fortress, you know where all these things are, right? The fortress where they all committed suicide, which was the Sicari way, we find Dead Sea Scroll materials up there. Well, that means that these are Sicari Essenes. And that, of course, accounts for the fact of the very zealot, militant ethos we have, not like one normally thinks Essenes to be, peace-loving, contemplating the navel. There's no one at Qumran is contemplating his navel, I assure you. They're all writing apocalyptic documents like the War Scroll and very militant. I'm not saying I agree with their ethos. It's for righteousness' sake, but they are very, very apocalyptic, militantly apocalyptic messianic. Anyway, okay, so who is Simon Iscariot? And here you see it's Judas of Simon Iscariot. I think you have the brothers of Jesus. I think those 4 people in the normative apostle list, where you have, I think they're listed as, don't have it in my mind. Anyway, they coincide. James, the son of Alphaeus, Simon the Cananean, and etc. And then I think there's another character there called Judas of James in Luke.